Good morning. Today we are continuing with our unit 1, CO7. I can write a value as a fraction and decimal. So we're going to have the same value written in different ways. As you progress through mathematics, you will find that you will need to convert between fractions and decimals more and more frequently. Some things are better written as fractions, while other things are better written as decimals. So let's think about this. What would we rather see as a fraction, and what are some values we'd rather see as a decimal? What do you think would be better written as a fraction, James?
Like baking.
When we're baking, when we're working on those recipes. So, recipes. It's a lot easier to know what one half, or not one half, let's say 2/3 of a cup of flour for your cookies. I made cookies this weekend and I needed to use the 2/3 of a cup. It's a lot easier than 0.333. I don't know how much 0.33 of flour is. That's not easy for me. Using that measuring cup, using those measuring spoons, those are easy. So fractions are a lot easier with our recipes. Do you have another one, Aiden? So maybe when we're measuring, like using a ruler, if we know that the wood we want to cut is 1 3/4 of an inch long, it's easier to find that 3/4 of an inch. Another thing could be test scores. So if we think about that religion test that we took, if we know that it was 11 out of 12 that we got right, it's easy to figure out what our score is based on that fraction. It's easy for me as a teacher to write it. You got one wrong out of 12, so you got 11 out of 12. Okay, it's easy for me to write that. I don't have to pull up my calculator and figure out what your decimal is. It's a lot easier just to write that fraction. What might be something that's better as a decimal, Gigi? Money. I know that that candy I want is $1.90. Let me rewrite that. $1.95. That 95 cents is easy to know. Decimals is not so easy, or sorry, fractions, it wouldn't be so easy to know how much it is. It's a lot easier when it's already in that decimal and we have those cents in there. Jillian?
The white stuff that they put on softball fields, the lines. So
Foul line?
What?
Foul line?
Foul line, yeah.
But what is that as a
Like,
decimal?
You have to add.
Do they have the numbers on the softball fields?
No, you just go to the edge of the grass.
Okay, so we're talking about actually writing out the decimals. Okay, so another thing might be timing for your races. So if somebody is running, we know how fast they ran in a decimal. You ran that mile in 4.52 seconds. So 4 minutes and 52 seconds. So you can break down your times with those seconds, and so that decimal is a lot easier. Okay, so sometimes we want it as a fraction, sometimes we're going to want it as a decimal. So now we need to think, how do we convert a fraction to a decimal? So we have the money, and they gave us a fraction, but we want it as a decimal, so we know how many cents it is to make it easier. So there are 2 steps to converting that fraction to a decimal. So we're going to make sure to write the fraction over 100. So we want 100 to be our denominator. 100 is our lucky number. We always want that denominator to be 100 when we want to convert to decimals. So if it is 1/5, we would have to find that equivalent fraction that brings that 5 as a denominator up to 100 as a denominator. So we always want to find that equivalent fraction that has 100 as our denominator. Then, this is what makes it easy. The numerator is your decimal. Because when we looked at our decimal places, we had our ones, then we had our decimal, then we had tenths, and then hundredths, and then thousandths. So if we know that something is hundredths, we can write it so it looks like it's in the hundredths place. So if our answer was 20 hundredths, so we had, in my example, we had 1/5, and we want to convert that to 100 on the bottom. We want to find that equivalent. What do I multiply the 5 by to get 100 as a denominator? James? 20. Whatever I multiply my denominator by, I multiply my numerator by. So now I end up with 20 hundredths. That's the same as 20 hundredths, because that 0 is in the hundredths place. So now it's easy to convert that fraction into my decimal. So we want that 100 on the bottom. It is our lucky number. So we can easily put it into the hundredths place when we write our decimal. Now I'm going to show you some of the friendly denominators that make this really easy for us. And we're going to see why it's really easy. So I'm going to erase and scroll up. So friendly denominators, you should know that make this process easier. They are 2, 4, 5, 10, 20, 25, and 50. How are these denominators friendly? What do you think makes them so friendly to this process, Melina? They are even numbers. Well, not all of them are even. We've got a 5 and a 25. Close. Easy. They're all factors of 100. So it's easy to multiply them up to get to 100, because that's our special number to always remember. So if we look at 2, what do we multiply the 2 by to get to 100? Bennett? 2 times what would equal 100? 50. So you're going to want to write these, because these are going to come in handy when we're doing our converting. So our next number was 4. 4 times what equals 100? Aiden? 25. And we have 5. James, what was 5 times?
20.
20 equals 100. 10 times what? 10 times 10 equals 100. And then we have 20 times what? 5 equals 100. 25 times 4 equals 100. And 50 times 2 equals 100. So as we're working on our converting, even just looking down at the bottom of this page, we can see those easy denominator numbers. So you're going to want to know what to multiply it by to get to 100. So you can look back at this section to see what we should multiply by, because we want to get 100 as our denominator, and then we want to use that numerator as our decimal. Aiden? to it. Patience. So let's do a couple together so we see how this works. So our fraction is 6/50ths. How can I make that into a decimal? What's my first step, Gigi? I want to multiply it by 2 because 50 times 2 equals 100. So what I do to my denominator, I have to do to my numerator. So what's my new numerator, Gigi? 12. Because 6 times 2 equals 12. How do I write that as a decimal? Is that it? 0.12. You always want to put that 0 before the decimal. Then we want to fill in that ones place. So if there's not a number to fill in, you put a 0 for it. So 0.12 is the same as saying 12 hundredths. Please wait till we're done with our lesson. So let's look at our next one, 4/25. What's my first step? Nolan, why am I timesing it by 4, Nolan? Because 4 times 25 gives me that 100 for my denominator. So what do I have to do next? I know my denominator is 100. What's my numerator? Is it just the 4 again? Why not, Melina?
16.
How did you get 16?
Because you multiply both the denominator and
So whatever I do to my denominator, I have to do to my numerator. So I have to times 4 gets me that 16. Now I want to put it into a decimal. What is my decimal going to be? Olivia, how did you get that, Olivia? What was that second step that we had to do? We're just taking that numerator and we're putting it into our decimal. We know it's over the 100, so it goes out to that 100th place, 0.16 hundredths. 0.16 is the same as 16 hundredths. We say it the same way, but they look differently. As a fraction, it's 16 over 100. As a decimal, it's 0.16, but they're both called 16 hundredths. So it's the same value, it just looks different. Are there any questions on converting from fraction to decimal? Big thing to remember, put that denominator as 100. Whatever you multiply the denominator by, multiply the numerator by. Matthew.
So say like the fraction like 3 over like 3 times what's
Mhm.
there. So like we do that and like times it by 10 and it's 30. Like would it be 0.3 or would it just be 0.30?
So Matthew has a great question. So if we look at 3/10, we multiply that by 10 because 10 times 10 is my 100. 10 times 3 is 30. So I could put it as 0.30, so that's 30 hundredths. I could also look at it and say, okay, 3/10, I know that first spot is the 10th spot. Is there a difference in the value between 3/10 and 30 hundredths? Is that a different value? No, it's the same amount. We call it a different number because one goes out to the 100th place and one stops at the 10th place. But we know we could just fill in a 0 into that empty space. So if it only goes, that was a great question, Matthew. If it's over a 10, we can do the same thing, but just go to the 10th place. So if it's over a 10, you can times it by 10 and go to the 100th, or you could just know that it's 0.3, and it's still correct. Aiden?
I'm confused on the 11, 26. Do you do that one?
Well, how do we get 25 to be 100? So what do we have to do to our numerator? And it's the same thing, the exact same thing we've been doing. All right, so Let's look at our second page, because we're not just going from fractions to decimals. We're also going to go from a decimal to a fraction. We're going to work in reverse. Hello, this is Kate. Perfect. Perfect. Thank you so much. Bye. Luciana. All right, so converting that decimal to a fraction. So this time, going backwards, we're going to write the decimal as the numerator. Over what special number?
100.
100. That is our key number. So we're going to write that decimal as the numerator, and the denominator will be 100. Now this is only important if our decimal is in the 100th place. Now, step 2 is you're going to simplify if necessary. So we have to see, what can we divide out? Can we divide out that 2, that 4, that 5, that 25, that 20, that 50 to simplify it down? So it's working backwards from what we just did to get to that original simplified fraction. So let's do some to practice it. 0.87. That's 87 hundredths. How do I write that as a fraction? Matthew?
87 over 100.
I'm going to take my decimal and put it over 100. Now I have to see, can I simplify it? So remember, our key numbers for simplifying with that 100 were those numbers from the other side. Oops, I forgot the 10. You're going to want to see, can any of those numbers be divided out of 87? We know we can divide it out of 100, but I have to be able to do it to both the denominator and the numerator. So can I divide any of those out of 87? No, I can't. So that is as simple as it gets. I don't have to do anything more with that one. Let's look at our next one, 0.55. How do I write that as a fraction, Melina? 55 over 100. Now I need to check, can I simplify it? Can I divide out a 2, a 4, a 5, a 10, a 20, a 25, or a 50? I see people shaking their hands, but I hear some people saying yes. Jackson? JT? What can I divide out of it?
5.
Oh, it ends in a 5. Anytime a number ends in a 5 or a 0, I can divide a 5 out of it. So what is 55 divided by 5? 5 goes into 5 one time, 5 goes into 5 one time. It's 11. What's 100 divided by 5? Matthew?
20.
20. Can I get any simpler than that? What do you think, Matthew?
Yes, because you can divide the 20 again by
But can I divide the 11 again? I have to do it same. I can only simplify if I can do it to the numerator and the denominator. So you're right, I could divide a 20 down more, but I can't divide the 11 down more. So I have to stop because I can't do it to both the top and the bottom. So I have to stop. I can only simplify if I can divide out of both the numerator and the denominator. Does that make sense? thumbs up if you're feeling good about this. Okay, I'm seeing lots of thumbs up, a couple, maybe. Okay, let's look at our next section. So I'm gonna erase so I can scroll up. This time we're gonna have some decimals and some fractions, and we have to convert it to the other one. So the one that I really want to point out here is, look at this, 0.555. What do you think I'm gonna put as my denominator, Aiden? How it goes out to the 1,000th place, so I need to put it over 1,000 because that's the place that it goes out to. Then I have to see, can I simplify it? Is there a number I can divide out of 555 and out of 1,000, Melina? I can divide that 5 out because it ends in a 5. 5 divided into 5 is 1. 5 divided into 5 is 1. 5 divided into 5 is 1. What is 1,000 divided by 5? James? 200. 200. Okay, so fractions, multiply it up to get to 100, and then take that numerator and put it as your decimal. Decimals, put it over 100 and simplify it down. So we're doing the same math, we're just going forwards and backwards with it. Then at the bottom, we have our checkpoint. Let's do review. Oh, working with those negative numbers. What key things should we do when we're working with those negative numbers, Aiden?
If it's a negative, I'm thinking multiplication.
You are thinking multiplication and division. When we're adding and subtracting with our negatives, use a number line. Remind yourself, if you are subtracting, you're going to the left. And if you are adding, you're counting to the right. So you're gonna find your first number on the number line. If you're gonna subtract, you're gonna go to the left. If you're gonna add, you're gonna go to the right. Draw a number line. If you don't have room on this page, look at that empty white space to the left, the back side of the other page. Draw your number line. It will help you. And then your decimals from least to greatest. It does not say that you have to stack this time, but if it will help you, stack them. Okay? Stack your decimals if it will help. So we are working on both of these pages. Okay, we have plenty of time for work time. If you are listening to this at home, we hope you are well, and we hope to see you soon.